views and opinions expressed on My Story Living with Lupus podcast represents each person's individual experience. By listening to this podcast or reading our blog, you agree not to use this podcast or blog as medical advice to treat any medical condition in either yourself or others. As always, consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having. My Story Living with Lupus podcast is officially trademarked, all rights reserved. Welcome back to another episode of My Story Living with Lupus. I'm your host, Susan Hendricks, and I'm so glad that you could join me on this Friday, November the 15th, 2019. Today we'll be talking about hypertension drugs could prevent memory loss in lupus patients, studies suggest. And also, it's time for another giveaway. That's right, it's time for another giveaway. So, you know what I want you to do. That's right, grab your cup of coffee, your cup of tea, and to those who are listening late at night, you know I appreciate you. So grab your favorite glass of wine and join the conversation right here on My Story Living with Lupus. Abundant Harvest Aquaponics, planting seeds to grow food and creating opportunities for people and families. You can contact this nonprofit organization at www.abundantharvestaquaponics.org. He is the author of Positive Energy 24/7 and his latest book, It Was Destined, Urban Legend. He's Detroit's own author, Henry Long. To purchase an autographed copy of his books and to purchase his ebook, go to WritePath247.com. That's WritePath247.com. You can also follow him on Instagram at WritePath247. Researchers from the Feinstein Institute for Medical Research have discovered that the activation of brain cells called microglia likely contributes to the memory loss and other cognitive impairments suffered by many patients with systemic lupus erythematosus, better known as SLE. The study, which was published in September in the Journal of Experimental Medicine, shows that ACE inhibitors, a class of drugs commonly used to treat hypertension, can block this process in mice and might therefore be used to preserve the memory of lupus patients. We all know that SLE is a complex autoimmune disease that arises when the body starts to make antibodies that targets its own healthy cells, often specifically recognizing DNA. Patients can suffer a wide variety of symptoms, but as many as 90% develop neuropsychiatric lupus, which is often characterized by cognitive impairment such as memory loss or confusion. Betty Diamond and colleagues at the Feinstein Institute for Medical Research in New York previously found that lupus patients experiencing memory loss often produce antibodies called DNR-ABS that recognize both DNA and a critical brain protein called the NMDA receptor. NMDAR antibodies are usually unable to enter the brain, but after injury or infection, DNR antibodies are thought to gain temporary access to the brain, where they can target neurons expressing NMDAR. This causes the neurons to die or lose the synapses that connect them to neighboring nerve cells, resulting in memory loss or other cognitive defects. Diamond and colleagues suspected that brain cells called microglia might be responsible for trimming the connections between neurons after exposure to DNR antibodies. These cells help clear away the debris of dead and dying neurons and can also remove excessive or unwanted synapses during brain development. If you would like to appear on an episode of My Story Living with Lupus, you can contact us at mystorylivingwithlupus@gmail.com. Also visit us on our Instagram page and also our website, My Story Living with Lupus. Motivational speaker, entrepreneur, and creator of Right Side of 50, Life Lessons with Sheila Smith. To book her for your next empowerment conference, contact her at rightside50@gmail.com or call 404-447-6897. Microglia are a type of neuroglia located throughout the brain and spinal cord. Microglia account for 10 to 15% of all cells found within the brain. As the resident macrophage cells, they act as the first and main form of active immune defense in the central nervous system. Microglia are distributed in large non-overlapping regions throughout the central nervous system. Microglia are key cells in overall brain maintenance. They are constantly scavenging the central nervous system for plaques, damaged or unnecessary neurons and synapses, and infectious agents, since these processes must be efficient to prevent potentially fatal damage. Microglia are extremely sensitive to even small pathological changes in the central nervous system. This sensitivity is achieved in part by the presence of unique potassium channels that respond to even small changes in extracellular potassium. To address the role of microglia in SLE, Diamond and colleagues analyzed mice that produce DNR antibodies capable of penetrating the brain and inducing memory loss. The researchers found that microglia are activated when DNR antibodies enter the brain and that a protein called C1q attracts microglia to the synapses of neurons targeted by these antibodies. Deleting the C1q protein or depleting the microglia cells themselves prevented neurons from losing their synapses after exposure to DNR antibodies. Now, ACE inhibitors such as captopril are a class of drugs used to treat high blood pressure. They are also known to block the activation of microglia. Diamond and colleagues found that captopril treatment protected neurons from DNR antibodies and preserved the memory of mice producing these antibodies. The study suggests that ACE inhibitors are a promising class of therapeutics that can easily move into clinical trials aimed at mitigating the cognitive dysfunction associated with neuropsychiatric lupus. When we come back, it's all about the giveaway, so stay tuned. Okay, it's the giveaway time, and what I'm giving away is a handmade gold, I call it blinged out trinket box. You can put your spare change in it, your earrings, your rings, and it has the letter K on it. The picture is posted on My Story Living with Lupus Instagram page. And this is all you have to do. You have to like the photo of the trinket box, follow at My Story Living with Lupus, repost this photo, and use the hashtag My Story Living with Lupus Giveaway 2019. That's all you have to do to receive. It's really nice. The picture is posted, like I said, on My Story Living with Lupus IG page. And that's all you have to do. This giveaway will end next Friday at 9 p.m. Well, that's it for me today. Be sure to check out My Story Living with Lupus Instagram page to see what the giveaway looks like. Also, you can always check out my story, Living with Lupus website. You can also listen to my story, Living with Lupus, right here on Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Podbean, Castbox, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. Tune in and go and subscribe to our YouTube page. That's my story, Living with Lupus. And before I go, I want to say this to you. When you're out of willpower, you can always call on stubbornness, because the struggle you're in today is developing the strength you need for tomorrow. So don't give up the fight. I'm your host, Susan Hendricks, for my story, Living with Lupus. I'll see you next week. Enjoy your weekend. The views and opinions expressed on my story, Living with Lupus podcast, represents each person's individual experience. By listening to this podcast or reading our blog, you agree not to use this podcast or blog as medical advice to treat any medical condition in either yourself or others. As always, consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having. My story, Living with Lupus podcast, is officially trademarked, all rights reserved.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.